What is up, and welcome to the newest edition of the Lakers Theory podcast. I am Shane Jackson. Joined with me, as always, is Austin Case, and we are recording this right after a 96-95 win in Boston for the Lakers, in which I still don't entirely know what the hell happened during that final sequence, those final 15 seconds. But we're going to do our best to explain it and explain this recent few game stretch here for the Lakers because it's been a while since we recorded. We recorded before the 76ers game. So we got 3 games to talk about and just kind of big picture takeaways. But I want to start from a micro view, thinking about focusing on the Celtics game because it's fresh in our minds. Austin, are you okay? Did you have a heart attack about 30 minutes ago?
I did not. I don't know. It was nice to see just a really good game because, even though they lost to the 76ers by 1 point, like that was a terrible game to watch because they were getting their butts kicked for pretty much the entire game, and then they went on a run. But yeah, I mean, it was awesome just to see this back and forth game where the largest lead was, I think, 8 points by the Celtics, and so. I did almost lose my shit there at the end when kind of I think Wall – is it Wall?
Who? What?
Who's their guard?
Kemba Walker. Yeah.
Okay. Walker popped it out of AD's hands and I was like, oh no, here it is. And then you see Caruso pop up in the frame and he pops the ball out. But I almost lost my stuff there because I was like, here it is again, like 3 games in a row. But we got lucky. But I mean, honestly, it was an awesome game to watch. And I feel like as a Lakers fan, I don't hate the Celtics as much as some people do. Like, I just don't, like, I don't understand the hatred for them so much. But, I mean, it was great to watch an awesome game like that.
Well, I hate the Celtics, and it boils down to actually LeBron in the Eastern Conference. The Celtics seem to always in the mix, and again, that's how my fandom started. Having a friend who's a Celtics fan, Jeffrey Doolittle, makes it worse. He likes to tag me in our fantasy basketball group chat all the time when the Lakers lose with a Stephen A. Smith video of saying the Lakers stink. He was supposed to be on tonight. He was supposed to talk about the Celtics, Eastern Conference in general, because the Lakers have played 3 Eastern Conference teams the last 3 games that we haven't talked about yet. And I thought it was going to be a good time to have him on just to say, hey, who's the real contender in the Eastern Conference? Who are the Lakers going to face in the finals? And then explain the Celtics in general, give us the feedback. Because, you and I, we have our Lakers thoughts and insights, but we don't know these teams that well. And so it's nice to have other people on from time to time. And that's what I was hoping for with Jeff. He decided not to. I think it's because the Celtics lost the game. He blamed his internet, but I'm going to guess it's because he didn't want to talk about the Celtics losing the Lakers. So we'll have him on next time the Lakers and Celtics play. It'll actually probably be a preview, and then we'll try to do a little bit more of that as well. We have a few friends who are fans of different teams, and just getting their insight will help out and provide more people who know about basketball, because sometimes it gets kind of boring just listening to Austin and I. But no, let's get back into the Lakers-Celtics game in general and what we thought. So, yes, I thought, for a stretch there, the Lakers were going to lose 3 in a row. And that's where we have to look at this, because I think even AD said this right after the game on the ESPN interview, but basically you'll take it any way you want, a win in any fashion you can get after the back-to-back stretch they had. But I did think it was weirdly poetic, if you want to call it that the way it ended. So Alex Caruso, who you mentioned, he was a big part of stopping that. He gets in front of the passing lane, makes life difficult for Jaylen Brown, who could have just gotten in transition and got an easy bucket. Instead, he has to swing it around, and it ultimately leads to a Kemba Walker shot. And the reason why I think it's perfect is because again, we haven't talked since before the 76ers game. So the 76ers game, Caruso gets switched on Tobias Harris. Those 76ers knew that on the final possession, and he takes a shot that was weirdly in the same spot or general spot as where Kemba Walker shot tonight. And it's just weird how that happened. Kind of bookend the 3 games that we're going to basically talk about. And it just shows that I think in the grand scheme of things, we could have talked even after that 76ers game that Caruso just needs more minutes. And I think you saw the reason why tonight. I mean, he was a big part of the win. The Lakers aren't as good without him on their team, and I think he does deserve more minutes. It's actually weird because I didn't think LeBron played that well tonight. I thought AD was inefficient, and the Lakers still won against a team I think is still a real, legit threat in the Eastern Conference. And a lot of that is credit to just the way they were able to close that out, even if it's in some sort of survival format. So, anything specific other than that final sequence stand out? I'm going to pull up the box score from that Lakers-Celtics game, but anything specific other than that final possession that you want to mention or you want to start with? We don't really have an outline for this podcast. We are both drinking alcohol. Austin's been drinking margaritas, so we get a looser version of him. I'm drinking a Blue Moon, and we don't really have a flow tonight. We're just going to kind of say stuff off the top of our head and call it good. We just figured we had to talk right after the Lakers-Celtics game. So, Austin, anything you want to mention from tonight?
I did find it interesting that THT was kind of one of the first guys off the bench. I mean, I'm an advocate for him. I like to see him play. But I did find that curious. You kind of said I want to see Caruso get more minutes. He's definitely earned them, and I personally think he deserves them. So I would love to see what they do to get him more involved. I was kind of surprised that Wes Matthews didn't play. That's probably where that's probably where his minutes were to THT, but. I mean, just in general, it was a good game. KCP was kind of a non-factor there, it looks like. So that's kind of surprising, but we'll take a win whenever we can get them.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to start. I love talking about lineups in general and rotations in general. It was interesting that this was kind of cut to a 9-man group right here. I mean, this is about as tight as we've seen Frank Vogel go with his rotation. At this point in the season, the Lakers are 15-6, by the way, 3rd in the Western Conference. But this is about as tight as we've seen Frank Vogel go. And I think that's interesting because, the complaints about Frank Vogel are somewhat fair in that he is trying to make, 11 guys happy, basically. And he's trying to figure out this puzzle throughout the regular season to figure out which lineups work and which ones don't, while also appeasing everybody at the same time. As he proved in the last postseason, you don't want to throw out Morris without knowing what you have in him, right? And so there's kind of a balance there, but they went with this group because they thought it was their best to beat the Celtics, and I thought that was interesting, just how much they tightened it in terms of the rotation. THT was actually the first sub off the bench, and then he played 13 straight minutes there in the first half. He didn't come out until the late second quarter. And I think the Celtics style dictates that a little bit. They play a lot of wings, and I think that led to maybe THT's presence. But you can just tell why he needs more minutes, which it's hard to do with how deep this team is, as we keep alluding to. But he plays defense with his hands up and stuff, every single possession. And I just love him so much for it. I mean, and then he's just playing balls to the wall all the time. I just love THT so much. And yes, we are going to advocate for him to get more minutes, for Caruso to get more minutes. At the end of the day, obviously, there's only so many minutes to go around. So, but the closing lineup, I think we should talk about tonight. It was Trez was in there with AD, Schroeder, Alex Caruso, and LeBron. So basically, and this was the closing lineup they essentially stumbled on a couple of games ago with the 76ers game when they went on that 13-0 run in the fourth quarter. Instead of Trez, it was KCP. But tonight, the way Trez was playing, he got the involved there late down the stretch. And I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. I don't think we'll see too many closing lineups with Trez involved in the mix. But what do you think about the 5 that closed that game out?
I think it's a good group. You kind of wonder. I don't see it sticking just because KCP's a really good defender for them. So you want to think that he's going to be on the floor more. Just looking at their minutes, he didn't play a lot, it seems like. So, but I mean, the five that into this game, I think it's a really good group. I like Trez in there. I think he was probably the four. And so I think he's I think he's great at the four spot. I mean, mainly size, but then I feel like he's going to be stronger than a lot of the fours, even though he's, probably the same size, maybe smaller than some. But I think it's a great group. Maybe you try to get KCP in there instead of Schroeder, maybe. That leaves your ball handling a little slim, but I mean, that's what LeBron's going to do most of the time. He's going to handle the ball. So I think maybe that could be a good ending into the game 5. But I don't know. We'll see. It got the job done tonight, so it's worth exploring more in the future.
Yeah, the important thing is I don't think there has to be a clear closing lineup, and I think that's pretty much obvious. What we've seen through 21 games this year is that based off the matchup and how guys are starting playing on any given night, you can throw out a different 5 to close things out. Obviously, the only locks are LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but a couple of games ago, the reason why that worked with the 76ers, AD plays more of the 5, and I actually thought the Schroeder just playing down the stretch was good. It gave you another offensive threat, and again, his defense is very good compared to what we thought it was going to be anyways. And so I really liked that lineup. I'll like any lineup with AD at the 5 when to close it out. But tonight's group was good. Any lineup that is not LeBron and the 4 forwards or whatever it is, that lineup is terrible. I think it's Wesley Matthews is in there, Markieff, Kuzma. Is that right? I think that's it. And Trez. It's just a bad lineup. And
just saying that lineup, it doesn't sound good.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of the whole what Frank Vogel has to, I guess, figure out now. And I don't know if there's a timeline to, narrowing it down. This is something I was thinking about a couple days ago. I like to think about random things we're going to talk about on the podcast, but I was wondering, when can Frank Vogel narrow this group down to figure out, hey, this is my rotation, this is what I want to do with postseason, and I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. In my mind, I was like, okay, All-Star break's coming up, let's do it then. And then I was like, well, that doesn't even make sense, because are you going to tell Markieff Morris in the playoffs maybe you need him, but he hasn't played in 2 months or played meaningful minutes in 2 months? That is so. I think this is going to be what it is for a while, and that's going to make it tough on any given night. Some nights we're going to be like, Alex Caruso only played 16 minutes. What the hell? Or, THG was a DNP. What the hell? And that's just the way this works because, yeah, this team is deep. There's 11 guys, and Frank Vogel has to figure out the best way to construct this roster going forward. So I don't know. It's definitely not a job I envy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Even though I like talking.
No, I could see them doing that, maybe sticking to 9 guys, and there's going to be kind of a 3-man rotation who's going to sit, or two guys are going to sit, and one of those 3 is going to get a majority of the minutes. So maybe that's kind of Vogel's way of figuring out the best group to put out there every night. But I mean, yeah, we're 21 games in. Well, I'm sure they're not too worried about having everything figured out this early in the season anyway. So
yeah. So let's go negative now, because I think that if we had recorded this a couple days ago, we'd have a different tune on this podcast. Because losing to the Pistons was just stupid.
Yes.
I didn't get to watch that game live. It's not one I was looking forward to watching the condensed version, which, by the way, the condensed versions on League Pass are a blessing. I've been busy every game night for the past week, but watching the condensed versions the next day is glorious. But yeah, so I don't know where I want to go here with this, but let's talk about this 2-game stretch as a whole. Uh, Yeah, 76ers game is explainable. Even before that game, because we recorded a podcast like right before that
Mhm.
game, basically, and we both said, I think we could see the Lakers losing the 76ers. Like that, it
Mhm.
just felt like that was coming. And honestly, if it wasn't for a crazy, run by the Lakers in the fourth quarter, it probably wouldn't even been as interesting as it was. But they still could have survived that game somehow, which was crazy to me.
Mhm.
And then the Pistons game. Without AD, obviously, but I don't know how much that matters. It was
Mhm.
just a bad game, and I I don't know what the explanation was for it. Like it just felt like a lot of people were disengaged in the second half. There was a cold stretch as hell in the fourth quarter. THT pulls that score within one on that 3-pointer, and then the Lakers went
Mhm.
on that crazy scoring drought, and they didn't score until the reserves were in when it didn't matter. And
Mhm.
so, Austin, you're someone who watched that game live. What can you tell me about the Pistons game?
Um, I have no idea. Like it was so bad to watch. And I mean, I'm kind of looking at the box score a little bit, and like they just fell apart in the second half. Like it was, man, I don't know. It was just bad. Like you think, okay, we're playing the Pistons. AD's not playing, but that shouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they just fall apart. Like I don't think they can explain it. Maybe they just kind of took the game for granted. Like, oh, we're playing a terrible Detroit team. But I mean, honestly, I have no idea. I was so mad there at the end. I I was getting super pumped because like they had kind of clawed their way back into it. Um, and then it just fell apart. And I didn't even watch till the end because I was so mad. I was like, you know what? I'm not like you're gonna waste my time. I'm not doing this. I did other things, but like it was just terrible. It was a bad game.
Yeah, so a lot of the questions in the post game press conference were kind of pointed towards just the road trip in general after that Pistons game. It was just like, and it goes back to the whole disengaged comment, but you know, I think it was kind of lost how long this road trip is.
Hmm.
And that's something you brought up in the group me, like basically right after. Like maybe it got to them eventually. And I told you there's no excuse for losing the Pistons, which I still don't think there is. But there probably was some explanation behind it. Like,
Hmm.
so I'm looking at the schedule. They've been away from home basically since what, January 20th? So the last 10 days, they've been to 6 different cities. They're going to close it up here in a couple days in Atlanta before they finally go back home. And again, this is first world problems, right? But they're in a hotel doing nothing like every single day in all these cities. Like in previous road trips, you would get excited about going to certain places
Hmm.
because you could see people or you could see places or
Hmm.
familiar with or whatever. And and there's fans in the stands, and there's just different ways to find energy when you're that far away from being home for that long. Whereas I don't think that's as evident or as apparent now. And every NBA team's doing this. It's not just the Lakers. I'm just saying I didn't fully comprehend that until this trip
Hmm.
because it was just like this is the longest trip the Lakers had or will have as far as the schedule as we know, and they're all on the East Coast, and it's just I think that's part of it. Again, you don't want to lose the Pistons, but I don't know. And and again, I don't want to feel bad because these are professional basketball players. Like this
Hmm.
really is the definition of first world problems. Like they get to go live in a hotel, and everybody's work life is affected by the pandemic in a certain way. It just
Hmm.
I think there's something to the fact that they aren't able to do anything other than sit in their hotel and then play basketball.
Yeah, I mean, the night before they played the Pistons, they had to claw their way back into that
Yeah.
game against the Sixers. Like, I mean, they were beaten down. Like, I mean, they had to have been wore out because, after that game, they shower, jump on a bus, get on a plane, who knows what time it was when they got in Detroit. But, I mean, like, these are excuses, but, like, I still feel like even though all that happened, they should have been able to at least not lose by 15 points to the Pistons.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, them being on the road for so long, coming off a game against the Sixers, like, it had to have affected them in some capacity, but they bounced back.
Yeah, and the pandemic again is impacting everybody. I mean, we haven't seen each other in person. Like, this is the only time we get to talk, and I don't see anybody hardly in person. Like, it impacts everybody, and obviously, so the Lakers aren't alone. They aren't the only NBA team that deals with this. I just think that plays a part into what we saw in Detroit. And granted, like the Detroit result could happen any other year too. Like. These things happen over any basketball season. Like, randomly you run into a night where just nothing is working. You're not engaged at all. And it leads to a very ugly loss. The only thing that made the Detroit one significant is because this team has been so good at just not turning one loss into two. Right? And they are such a team that's able to bounce back because, hey, they're good. They're the defending champs. They got a certain swagger to them, right? And that's why it was tougher to accept the Pistons' loss, and because they were like one of the few bad teams in that conference. So I don't know. I think it all played a part into it, and so yeah, an AD resting on back-to-backs. I don't actually care about that. I think there's actually a fraction of Lakers Twitter who's very upset with AD resting on the back-to-backs, but I actually think more players should be resting. From the time to time, as long as you figure it out. I mean, you can't have LeBron and AD rest on the same night, but I think I'm fine with that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't care that he was out. Like, I mean, if he plays, they definitely don't lose that game. But I mean, if you're wore out, then rest. Like. Like, what everybody else outside of the team and stuff like that are saying, like, who cares what they say? Like, you got to take care of yourself. So if you need a day off, then take a day off.
Yeah. It was more, so this is the second back-to-back that AD is rested. And both times he's like had a very like outspoken press conference after the first game, right? Like, he called out the Lakers defense and then rested in the Chicago Bulls game the next night. And then here he said he was basically implying that, like, he's healthy or whatever, and you'll see tomorrow, and then he rests. And so that's the only thing that rubs me the wrong way. It was just like, let's stop being as outspoken the night before and then resting. Like, that's starting to drive me insane. But I mean, in general,
he could have thought he was playing tonight. The other night against Detroit, but I mean, maybe his calf or thigh. I mean, maybe something was acting up where they were like, no, let's not risk it, especially since they had Boston tonight. So maybe that was the big picture that they were looking at. But yeah, I mean, he said look out for Detroit, so and then didn't play, but whatever.
He started out with a double-double tonight. Again, I don't think he was like amazing by any means. And him and LeBron definitely both down the stretch. They fumbled the ball. They messed up. Like, it almost coughed up the game. Like, it still blows my mind how the Lakers won that game. Like, that's just crazy. Let's talk a little about the 76ers. We've kind of mentioned them, in different ways already, but I want to go back to it. Again, that was what was the score?
107-106. Yeah.
107-106. Tobias Harris hit the game winner. After the Lakers took a lead on that 13-0 run, what was like the main thing that caught your attention from that game?
Trying to think back.
I'll tell you.
I actually had a lot going. Like our puppy Leia, I had to take her to the vet that night during the game because she was breathing funny, and Mallory, my wife, was really worried about it, so I just took her. But so I kind of missed a lot of that game, but for the most part, it just kind of seemed like they couldn't get things going for the entire game, and then it clicked there for like 13 minutes or so, or not 13 minutes, but like they had that run there towards the end, and then just kind of the Sixers got a great. I mean, that was a good matchup. Tobias Harris, had Caruso on him, so I feel like Tobias Harris, his caliber of playing. I mean, that's just a good matchup, and you're gonna live with that.
So where I wanted to kind of direct the 76ers discussion, this is what we would have done with if Jeff was on, but I wanted to establish who like the tiers of the Eastern Conference teams, right? Or the contenders. Because I think there is a fraction of people who are scared of the 76ers because there's this idea that the Lakers interior defense is not as solid anymore. And so that would be your concern, right? So Austin, that's what I want to ask you. I want your opinion. Is if you saw the 76ers in the finals, would you be concerned with that matchup?
If AD is not wanting to play the 5, then yes.
He's going to play the 5, so
if AD is playing the 5, then I feel more comfortable that he can defend Embiid really well. Like, I mean, Embiid's crazy talented, so like he's going to get his buckets and stuff, but I would feel much better knowing that, anyone but Marc Gasol is going to be on it, because that's just a disaster waiting to happen. But in a 7-game series, I think I would feel comfortable the Lakers could pull it out, knowing that AD is going to be at the 5.
See, I actually thought Marc Gasol, I thought he was fine. Like, so Embiid is such a challenging matchup because he dictates the game so well. Like he can put the opposing post in foul trouble because he's so good at drawing fouls. He does the swipe thing, and he can dictate a game that way just by getting to the free throw line, and that's what he did early. But I think you saw the Lakers start to like send double teams his way a little bit more and forced him to settle for more outside the paint shots in the second half in particular. So I think Marc Gasol was behind that as well. AD obviously closing the game as the 5 was behind that as well. But I think that's a matchup that Marc Gasol could actually do well in, and it's a good matchup as in, he is going to face Jokic at some point, like in the playoffs, in the Western Conference. We may never see the 76ers in the finals, but we know this is a good matchup or measuring stick for maybe how the Lakers would face the Nuggets as well. And I actually was left more impressed, or I don't even know if that's the right word, optimistic after what I saw from this game. Because, I don't even remember what Embiid finished with. He obviously got his, though. I just felt like the Lakers did a much better job after the first quarter in particular. And I don't think the 76ers scare me. And this is what I wanted to get into with Jeff and you. But I think if we got to a finals, and actually I think this about a lot of teams on the Eastern side, once they got to the finals, I'd be like, okay, the Lakers are going to win. But I don't think we're the ideal matchup for the 76ers. Like, we're just so fast compared to them. And I don't think they have guys who were even close to what LeBron and AD would provide in a final series. And I don't know. I wouldn't be as concerned is what I was trying to get at. I think at the end of the day, the Nets probably terrify me the most. So, and honestly, like, that's the one team the Lakers haven't seen. Like, they faced the Bucks, Celtics, and 76ers now, and so the only team left is the Nets. I don't know, when is that? Do you know when that is?
February 18th.
Okay.
It's in LA.
Okay. So I don't know. Is that how you would go with the hierarchy of the East? Is it Nets first and then?
Yes. I feel like the Nets are a really dangerous team. I don't know though. I feel like I just feel like the Lakers could match up well, and their defensive capabilities would be able to kind of just offset how that game would go. Because I mean, it's going to be so tough to stop those 3 guys, but I feel like they're going to be tough enough defensively but also have enough on the offensive side that they would be able to win a 7-game series.
Yeah, KD terrifies the hell out of me, and I just don't feel that way about basically any other player. But any other team, the best player on the floor is LeBron. It's when you get in a series with KD, I'm like, I don't know, and it just scares me. Real quick, the 17 points the Lakers held the Boston to in the fourth quarter is their season low in that quarter. So defense really stepped up in the fourth quarter, and that was really the reason why the Lakers were able to escape a Boston with a win. Next up is Atlanta, which is on Monday. I don't know when the next time we'll record a pod. Maybe we'll do it after Monday. I don't know. If not, it would be a couple days later before the Nuggets game, right? That's who they play next Thursday.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if not, we'll do a pod like Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday, previewing the Nuggets game and recapping the Hawks game. Anything else you want to talk about, Austin, before we head out of here?
I did not have anything.
Oh, wow. We covered it all. Even without Jeff, we were able to get this done. I thought this was good, though. We recapped 3 games. We talked big picture, and now we'll move on. The Lakers are back in the win column, and we are back podcasting. He's Austin Case. I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you so much for listening to this Lakers Theory podcast, and see you next time, Lakers fans.